and welcome to video number 3 in our series introducing you to the basics of Python, and we are looking at introducing Python using turtle graphics. Now hopefully in your last lesson or your last video that you watched, you'll have seen how we created a square in turtle graphics by importing the turtle library into Python and being able to produce basically this. In this video we're going to build on that and look at the idea of variables. So to look at variables, first of all we're going to go into Scratch and look at a program that I've written here that's very similar to what we've done before, but I wonder if you can notice this time a slight difference in terms of how I've set the length of each side of our square. I've created here something called a variable and I've called it side. Okay, so and I've set the value of side to 100, and then every time I've wanted to move a number of steps, I've told it to use the value that I've stored inside. Okay, and this is an example of a variable. A variable is a memory location, and basically that the computer uses to store something in when it wants to remember something, and in this case we want the computer to remember how long our side is, so we create a variable to allow it to remember it. It's a bit more complicated to explain probably than it is to show you. So what I'm going to do is two things. I'm going to show you how to do this in Scratch first of all, and then we're going to look at how to do it in Python. So I'm going to just we're going to pause the video and look at starting with the square program that we looked at last week and how to add variables to that. Okay, so here is our square program from last lesson, and you can see that what I've done is I've taken the length of the side, the number of steps, out of the move block, and that's because we're going to store that value in a variable. So to do that in Scratch, first of all I go over to the variables section and I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to click on that, and it's always call a variable a sensible name. Give it a name that represents what it actually means. So this is the side of my square, the length of the side of my square, so I'm going to call it side. I could call it length or length square, but I'm going to call it side. And I've already called a variable side, so in that case I'm going to call it length this time. Okay, I'm going to call it length. Okay, and you see now that length pops up there on my stage to say what the current value of that variable is. So I haven't actually given it a value. It doesn't represent or mean anything. So the first thing I actually need to do is set a length, set the contents of that variable, set the value of that variable. So I'm going to drag this block in here and set length to, and I can give it a value. So I'm going to choose 100, which is basically what we had as the length of our side before, and then I'm going to drag the variable in. I'm not going to drag side in, I'm going to drag length in to here so that we can basically set length of the side to whatever value we've got in here. So if I run the program, there you go, it does exactly what it did before, but this time let's just try changing. If I try changing that value to 200 and then click it this time, you can see that it changes each time, and I only have to change the variable once. So if I do a little teeny tiny square, it will do it a little tiny. You can barely see it because he's hidden over the top of it. Let's go for a sensible size, sensible length like that, and then run it again. There we go. So that's how this works in Scratch, and again, just like last week, the principles of how it works in Python are very similar. So we're going to flip over to Python now and start with the program we had last week and look at how that works. So here is our program from last week, which if we run it, there we go, so it's drawing a square. Perfect. So all I'm going to do is create a variable inside Python that I'm going to use to store the length of the side that I want the square to have. So you don't have to put the spaces in here, by the way, it's just so to make the line easier to see for you. I'm going to call this side equals 100, and then what I'm going to do is change that Oops, yes, no, that's fine. I thought I'd change the angle then. And change it each time so that it represents slide. So the word variable, if you think about what the word variable means, it means to change. So it means I could change the contents of that variable. I could change that value anytime I want to. I'm going to look in another couple of videos about how to do that. But let's just save our video and run it. And there we go, does exactly what it did before. It does a square, but this time if I change the value and then run it, it does a bigger square. So you can see if we were doing a really large shape with a lot of sides of the same length, it'd be much more efficient to create a variable to store that value in. And obviously what I could do if I wanted, I could have a second value. So if I'm going to change this one to length, and I'm going to do another variable called height, and what I'm going to do is change how my shape looks. So I'm going to make it the first variable is going to say length, and then it's going to go height, then it's going to go length, and then it's going to go height. So I'm storing two different values. Let's run it and see what it does. It draws a rectangle. And then if I want to change the dimensions of that rectangle, very easy. If I want to change the height, I just change it there. That will give me a thinner rectangle. And if I want a longer rectangle, obviously I could just make that, let's just make that 1000. Run it again. Almost it's too long for the canvas there, so I need to do that again. But you can see how easy it is to use variables to change what our program does. It's a very, very important concept in programming, and they work really just the same in Python as they do in Scratch. So have a go at adapting the program that you did last week. Try again experimenting with using different variables in your program and see what kind of shapes you can draw.